Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the current science and technology space here. My name is Susan. I'm an educator here at the museum, and it is my happy privilege, along with my partner in crime, David Sittenfeld, to welcome Northeastern University and associated groups at the Northeastern University. You'll hear from some of them today. We're going to be talking about Fabien Cousteau's Mission31, where Fabien Cousteau, grandson of the famous Jacques Cousteau, underwater explorer, he is going to, on this 50th anniversary of his grandfather living 30 days on the bottom of the ocean, he will be living 31 days on the bottom of the ocean. And he's now on day 25 or so, I believe now. And for the past week, there's been a group of Northeastern researchers and divers living down there with him. They stay down all day, every day. They're out in the water about 8 to 10 hours a day, and then they're staying down there. They don't have to come back up to the surface, though, for 2 full weeks. So they'll be down there another 5 or 6 days or so. And while they're down there, they can do an amazing amount of research because they can stay out for long periods of time at these depths, about 50, 60 feet down, instead of only an hour at a time, which is normally the healthy mark for staying underwater. So we've got a whole bunch of different presentations today talking about the various science that the underwater team is collecting data for and sending it back up to our researchers here at the surface to learn all different things about ocean sustainability and, among other things, getting women interested in science. There's 2 women living down there right now, Liz McGee and Grace Young, and they have some amazing blogs talking about their experience down there. First, though, we'll set you up with a really cool video to get you excited about, as if you're not already excited, to get you excited about the kind of work that they're doing down there today. So we'll start with our video.
There have been more people who have gone into space than have lived underwater.
It's a really important mission because nothing has been done quite like this.
Fabien Cousteau is leading a 31-day mission in the world's only underwater laboratory, Aquarius. And we're delighted to advise him on some really exciting science that's going to take place.
There are 4 specific areas where Northeastern is working. The first is looking at the health of our oceans. How can we understand what state our oceans are in? The second is, how can we use that information to live sustainably? Benefit from the ocean, but not damage it. The third is, how do we rekindle that sense of excitement in the next generation? And the fourth is celebrating the role of women in science.
I heard a statistic the other day that only 22% of the aquanauts that have lived underwater have been women, so I can't wait to spread the word and hopefully inspire young women to join marine science.
By having Liz living underwater, we can really get all these really good 24-hour measurements with the coral and study these giant sponges for a very long period of time, and you can't do that out of other platforms. And so we really get a good idea of what's going on with the human-ocean connection through this project and urban coastal sustainability.
Northeastern is dedicated to what we call use-inspired research focused on solving real-world problems. Climate change is a real-world problem. So this gives us an opportunity to engage in something that we're committed to and also to contribute to the fundamental knowledge.
Okay, so hopefully you're getting even more excited about the great lineup of information we have for all of you today. We've got a whole bunch of tables back in the middle. We're going to have a touch tank here at 1 o'clock, and you can talk to a whole bunch of researchers that are using all this information that they're getting living down underwater for 2 weeks at a time. And then at 2:30 today, if you want to come back and join us, we'll be talking to several of the aquanauts who will be underwater. We'll be talking to them from the Aquarius habitat. And you guys can ask him whatever questions you want about living down underwater. And hopefully we'll get some live footage of Liz McGee swimming around underwater as well while we're watching her and talking with her. So we have a really fun lineup for all of you today. I hope you'll be able to join us throughout the afternoon. And right now, to start us off, we have Isaac Westerfield, who will be talking about corals.
Test. You guys hear me? Everybody good? Okay. So my name's Isaac. I am a geologist and coral scientist at the Marine Science Center in Nahant with Northeastern University. And I'm going to be talking about the effects of environmental stress on corals. One of the labs down there, Mark Patterson's lab, is doing some long-term studies on the chemical reactions going on within and around corals as they experience different stresses. So why should we care about coral reefs? Well, the main reason is they're the most biologically diverse ecosystem on the planet. A lot of people talk about tropical rainforests as being the most diverse. Well, corals are actually a step above them. What this means is you have more organisms and different types of things living in this environment than anywhere else in the world. So it's very important that we save these sorts of environments, or we lose a lot of the animals that live there too. So coral reefs come in lots of different shapes and sizes and colors. So this is a very shallow water coral called a staghorn coral. This is a brain coral that a lot of people have seen. So this is more of a bulbous stony coral. And this is a purple finger coral, so that's a little smaller. And then this is a different type of staghorn coral. So you can see they're very different. Lots of different things can live there. So we've got fish, sharks, sea urchins, anemones, snails, tube worms. And then it's not just what lives in the ocean that takes advantages from these coral reefs. A lot of things live on the land that was actually created by older coral reefs. So hermit crabs, birds, iguanas, and people, if we're lucky enough. So what do corals do for us? Well, coral reefs provide a lot of services to human society. They act as fisheries. A large proportion of the world lives along the coast, and a lot of them get their meat and protein from fish that are caught on reefs. Coastal protection. When you have a reef that's built out from a coastline, the waves come in and they break on the coral reef instead of coming in and eroding the land that you live on. Building materials. The skeletons of these coral reefs can be used later on to actually build houses and different things. Biochemical compounds for medicine. A lot of medicines that are being used today are being created by chemicals found in the organisms on these reefs. So if we lose the coral reefs, we lose access to future medicines. And tourism. That's one of the biggest things. A lot of people like to go scuba diving to see these corals. I know I do. So what is a coral exactly? Well, a coral is a small colonial organism. So it looks like a little octopus, an upside-down octopus, and they live in groups on the bottom of the ocean. And they can be different sizes. So some of them can be, that big, and some of them can be half an inch across. So they range in a lot of sizes. So what are they doing down for Mission 31 with these? Well, they're looking at how these corals are reacting to internal and external environmental stressors. Dr. Mark Patterson and his student Sarah Williams are the ones heading up this project. And what they're doing is they're going to look at the inside of these corals. They're going to measure what's going on inside them. Well, these corals are really small. How do you take the temperature of a coral when the thing you're taking the temperature with is 3 times the size of the coral itself? Well, you have to use very, very small measurement devices. So what they're going to look at is they're going to look at the water movement in and around, the exchange of gases within the organism and around it. So as it breathes like we do, they'll measure the amount of oxygen inside and outside. And then they'll also look at what's called calcification. So corals, they build their skeleton by creating what's essentially a rock underneath them, and that's their skeleton, and that's called calcification. And photosynthesis, that's how they make their food. They take in the light and they make sugars using the light. So there's two different general types of corals. You have what's called a perforate coral and an imperforate coral. So in a perforate coral, all the polyps are connected, the little organisms, like their roots connect and they kind of form one giant organism. The imperforate, on the other hand, they're not really connected. They just sort of live next to each other. And the difference here is when you've got them connected together, they share the resources. And so when one changes, the others might be affected more than if they weren't sharing the resources. So here's kind of a quick look. Here's imperforate. You see down here at the bottom, there's really nothing. They're not connected except right there on the surface. Whereas perforate, you can see they kind of have like little tubes. Those are the connections, so they can share materials. So how are they going to do this? Well, they're going to use this device up here at the top. It's about that big and about that tall. I think the general price on that was about $60,000. Anything that you're trying to measure underwater, the price tag goes way up. And what they're doing here is they're using these very, very tiny probes to actually stick them inside the coral's mouth and measure what's going on. Now, these are made of glass, so they're very fragile. And they're very small. And how small are they? Well, they're about 25 microns across. A micron is very small. Your hair is about 50 microns thick. So these things, these little measurement probes are half the size of a human hair. So you can imagine how fragile they are. And you can see there's little electronics at the end of each one, so they have to have very, very small pieces that go into those. And here's the way they do it. They basically have these little micro adjustment arms, and they mount the probe onto them, and then they turn little dials ever so slightly, one at a time, until they lower it down into the coral. In the lab, it's a little easier. It's just sitting there. You know, you can move around, and there's nothing else going on. Underwater, you've got different currents coming in and moving stuff back and forth. And so if you move that at all just out of the side, you're going to break that off, and now you're in trouble. You need to get a new probe. So here's Sarah. She's down in Florida right now. She's doing some of the field work for this. This is her working in the lab. And there's another angle. All right, so I'm going to show you guys a little video that they took when they first got there about a week ago. So this is Sarah. This is Sarah Williams adjusting. Yeah, go ahead and go full screen. Yeah, they've got the mounting devices in, and they've got the probe on. And you can see how little they actually do to modify where the probe is. You can see right there, so she's adjusting tiny knobs and just moving it ever so slightly, fractions of a millimeter. And if you can imagine, if a wave comes by or a fish comes by and knocks that, that's going to break it off. So that's the advantage to the Aquarius mission. This Mission 31 is, while Sarah is not actually living in the habitat, she can only do surface dives. So she's got a maximum of about an hour downtime. The aquanauts, as they're called, they live on a tether, basically, when they're out in the water. So they can go out for 5-6 hours at a time. So they can go out whenever they want and keep an eye on this stuff and make sure things aren't broken and make sure they're working right. And so here's the device here. And so they have a little wand that they use to tap on it to make sure it works. So they change the settings. For those of you that have never been scuba diving, you never give a thumbs up underwater. You always have to do the OK sign, because in scuba diving, thumbs up means it's time to go to the surface. So if you tell someone thumbs up, you're probably telling them you're having an emergency and you need to go up right now. And so she's very excited with her progress. So throughout their 2 weeks down there, they're running different experiments. They're putting in different probes and they're checking different corals. That's it. Yeah. All right. And yep. And so here are a lot of the sponsors that this mission is being covered by. I'd like to thank everybody involved, Northeastern and Museum of Science especially for hosting us. And I will take any questions you guys have. How much time do we have?
Got a couple minutes if there's any questions, or if you'd like, does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, if you want to talk to him, he's got some of his research and some pictures and some corals all set up at the table there that you're welcome to go over and talk to him as well. But if you would join me in thanking him and for such a wonderful presentation and some cool pictures. And I wonder if Sarah knows that you showed that video of her dancing underwater.
She sent it to me. It's her fault.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all very much, and we'll start our next presentation at 1 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us.